Hello there, everybody in DBQ land. We are going to figure out how to write a DBQ. The focus of this is going to be for Euro, but it can be used for World or US as well. So the DBQ, the document-based question, is an acquired skill, one that takes practice. The skills we utilize in analyzing a DBQ are the same ones historians use when examining documents and writing history. We'll learn these skills to be better historians, and along the way, we'll develop the ability to dominate the DBQ on the AP exam. On the exam, the DBQ will be on topics from 1600 to 2001, so not the very beginning and not the very end of the class. It counts for 25% of your total score. After a 15-minute planning period, students get 45 minutes to complete the DBQ. We're going to do a lot with that planning period. Don't get discouraged if you don't get it right away. There's a lot of skills that we're going to be working on, and the goal is to improve on them throughout the year and learn to do the work of historians. So there are 7 documents, and there's a question that goes with those 7 documents. This is a recent example. Evaluate whether the feminist movement of the 1800s was motivated primarily by a desire to achieve economic equality or a desire to achieve political equality. And what we've seen is that's how the College Board questions are. They set up a yes or no. They set up a one or the other. And we'll see that the idea is we want to make both arguments. So, scoring. The DBQ is out of 7 points. There are 4 categories that you have to demonstrate mastery of, and they go into, and a couple of them have 2 points. All right, so the first category is contextualization. This is going to situate the argument by explaining the broader historical events or developments relevant to the question. You have to use info not found in the docs, and you want to link broader events directly to the question. So what is this? This is introducing the question. Your contextualization is going to be the bulk of your intro. It's going to be 4 to 5 sentences, okay? How and why did the question happen then at that point? What happened immediately before it? What is the context of what this is happening? You want to relate the topic of the prompt to events, developments, or processes that occur around the same time. Time frame of the question. What I always think of this as is there's one of 2 ways you can think about this. You can think about this if you're watching a show and you're watching a whole series, you're catching up on the series, and there's the previously on The Last Kingdom or previously on whatever show it is you're watching. That little preview, it lets you know what happened immediately before, but it also brings in stuff from like earlier shows that they're like, you might need to remember this for this show. Another way to think about it is what chapter is this question in? So let's say we had a question about the plague, hypothetically speaking. That's in so there's one section in your reading on the plague. That's great. What's the chapter that's in? So you set that up with the Middle Ages. You talk about the age of faith. You talk about the lack of knowledge of disease, different ways to do that. Okay? The point is not awarded for merely a phrase or reference. Like I said, you're planning 4 to 5 sentences, and one of those is your linking sentence. That's connecting your context to your thesis. So now let's talk about the thesis. Thesis is your claim, those of you who remember from your Highland days or Oak Grove days. You must have a clear, I say 1 sentence because there's no reason why it can't be 1 sentence, but it doesn't have to be. Explicit and historically defensible thesis that answers all parts of the question, either in the intro or conclusion. Take a stand on your argument. If it asks you, was it this, or was it more political or more religious, or what was the most significant cause, you are going to take a stand and say, this was the most significant cause. It was more political. But then we're also going to save a place for us to answer it the rest of the way also. You cannot simply restate the question. Your thesis points must be specific ideas that answer your question. Your thesis can never be social, economic, and political. The causes were social, economic, and political. We know those cause everything. You need to be more explicit. Your thesis must develop an argument that recognizes historical complexity by placing the documents in groups that directly answer the question. Your groups are going to match your thesis, and each group is a paragraph with 4 documents in there. Your thesis will divide your answer into groups to make your paragraphs, and use your thesis to set up your essay for complexity. That's the more later, that's the idea that you're saying, yes, the most significant causes were political, but it was also religious. And that's going to set up our complexity point there. Now, the evidence. There are 2 separate parts of the evidence here. Parts 1 and 2 are related. So part 1 is you're using the content of at least 3 docs, 3 of the 7 docs, to address the topic of the prompt. You get 1 point for doing that, for actually using the documents. You can't just list them. You can't say in documents 2 and 3, both of these did that. You're not using them explicitly. You have to use analysis to support your thesis. Analysis is the how and the why. How does this document support your thesis? How does this make your point? And then describe, not simply quote, the content from at least 3 docs. We'll talk about this more later. Don't quote the docs, especially at anything more than a few words. So that's for 1 point, all right? If you do that for 4 docs, you get a 2nd point. That's using your evidence, okay? So to get your 2 evidence points, you only need to effectively use the documents, use 4 of the 7 documents. We're going to talk more later. We're going to plan on using all 7 of them every time, but you only need 2 to get the evidence points. Use 4 of the 7. The second part of the evidence point is beyond the docs, okay? Beyond the docs is separate from the evidence. Beyond the docs is you are using at least 1 additional piece of specific historical evidence beyond that found in the docs, hence the beyond the docs, relevant to an argument about the prompt. So it must be connected to the DBQ and fit in one of your groups. So it is an additional piece of evidence that fits in your paragraph, that makes the same argument you're making in one of your paragraphs, but isn't in the document. Okay? You have to have 1 well-developed example in 1 body paragraph. So whatever your 3 groups are, you need something else that's not in the documents to prove that. How well developed does it need to be? It needs to be about the length that you would make an argument with the document. So 3, 4, 5 sentences. Must be more than a phrase of reference. It must be different from the evidence used to earn the point for contextualization. You can't double dip. A lot of times, some of the evidence used in contextualization also would use for beyond the docs, be able to be used for beyond the docs, and vice versa. But you can't double dip. You can only use that same evidence for one or the other. So it's an additional piece of evidence beyond the docs that supports your specific argument and fits in a specific paragraph. It can't just be like, this also happened, or this is something I know about this topic. It needs to support your argument. All right, next up is the analysis and reasoning part. And this is actually what I think is the hardest part of the DBQ and what we're going to be taking a lot of work to do. So the first part of analysis and reasoning is explaining how or why the significance of the author's point of view, purpose, historical context, and or audience is relevant to your argument for at least 4. College Board says 4. We're always going to say to do 5, just so we don't mess it up. If we do mess it up, then we have kind of 1 cushion there of the documents. All right. So for 5 of the documents, you are doing what we're going to refer to as captone. Okay. Captone is one of the multiple acronyms we're going to have here for the DBQs. Captone is context. So that's setting the document in the scene. What is going on? Why is that scene? Why is that context significant? Audience. Who is the intended audience? Who is the, not necessarily intended audience. Who is the audience? Is this a speech to auto manufacturers? Is this a letter to the editor of a popular right-wing newspaper? Is this going in a student newspaper? Who is the audience? A lot of times that overlaps a little bit with the context. The point of view. That's oh, excuse me, I forgot the purpose. I forgot the first P there. Purpose, and that overlaps a lot with the audience. Is he trying to convince? Is is the speaker trying to bring to light something? Is she trying to educate people on the topic? So we've got context, audience, purpose. Okay, those tend to overlap a little bit. The second P is point of view. This is one of the harder ones. Point of view means who somebody is impacts what they say. How who they are impacts what they say. Okay, we'll talk more about that in class. And then we've got tone. Is this tone sarcastic? Is it angry? Is it frustrated? Is it elated? I feel like tone is one that we very frequently forget, that because we just read this document, we just read the words, we don't try to capture what the author was getting at. And then one part to consider for the author when you're thinking about context, when you're thinking about audience, when you're thinking about purpose, and when you're thinking about point of view, you can always think of Cornpeg. Who is this person? So here's another acronym for you. Okay, Cornpeg is class. Where are they on the social hierarchy? Occupation, obviously significantly related to class, but sometimes that might be the most important part of them. Are they a factory worker? Are they a peasant? The R is religion. Different parts of the unit, or different parts of the year, excuse me. This is going to be significant. Catholic, Protestant, Orthodox, Deist. The N is nationalism, or nationality, rather, excuse me. So where are they from? That can play a very big role in what is going on, why they are saying, how that impacts what they say. The E, you kind of get a couple choices here. The E could be education. Are they well educated? Are they not? Some people say it's economics, like where they are. Are they a Marxist? Are they a capitalist? Are they rich? Are they poor? And then the G is gender. Several times documents, the gender of the person is going to play a role in describing how who they are impacts what they say. So that is the first analysis and reasoning point. So you're doing cap tone for 5 documents. The second analysis and reasoning point, this is the hardest and most missed of the College Board, is complex understanding. So complex understanding demonstrates a complex understanding of the historical development that is the focus of the prompt, using evidence to corroborate, qualify, or modify an argument that addresses the question. In order to earn the complex understanding point, the idea must be well developed and be more than a phrase or reference. There are multiple ways we can achieve this task, and we will be using yet another acronym, the most awkward of all of them, and you can't see it because my camera is not in focus. BM CT 75. Take my word for it. I don't know why I can't get it. There we go. BMCT 75. That stands for both multiple, connections thematic, and then 7 docs used in captone. So both and multiple, these are the 2 big ones. These are going to be the ways that these are going to be our money makers on this. Okay? If the question asks for the most significant causes, we're going to give the causes, and we're also going to give effects in a separate paragraph. If it asks for similarities, we're going to give similarities and differences. Was the 30 Years' War primarily political or economic? We're going to say it was political or religious. We're going to say it was political, but also religious. Okay? So that's the first big wave. So many of the questions are set up for you to do that. Going back to our example question, whether feminist movement was either economic equality or political equality. And we're going to say it was primarily economic equality, paragraph 1, primarily economic equality, paragraph 2. And our third paragraph is going to be political equality, or vice versa, however the documents take you. Okay? Multiple, another way to do this, explain multiple causes, effects, or changes. The most significant cause was this, but there was also these. And so that both multiple, those are the biggest ways that we are going to look. And that has to come from our thesis. That has to come from the way we organize the docs. That comes from everything. The next two are draw connections to other time periods. So this is connections. If the question is saying, describe the economic transformation of Western Europe from this year to this year, you say, okay, here's what happened in Western Europe. And then you're going to bring in other places as well. Okay, now, other places include, well, other time periods you can bring in. If it says describe religious transformations from this period to this period, then you can bring in the later time period or an earlier time period. For geographic regions, you can do East and West, North and South Europe. Okay, but for connections, you primarily want to stay in European history because it turns out that's the class. Okay, if you can't find connections from European history, then you can do world history. That's the next step down. If you can't find anything from European or world history, then you can do American history. If you can't find anything from Europe, world, or America, then you can do the Nazis, because everybody tries to connect things to the Nazis. Okay? But this is a whole paragraph. The T on the BMCT 75 is thematic. If it's asking for political changes, you can bring in religious changes, social changes, economic changes. That one's used a little bit more in the LEQ, which we'll get to next week, than the DBQ. But it still is useful to have in the back of your head. And then for the 75, you can get the complexity point for using all 7 docs. So use that every time. And then do the captone for 5 docs. College Board requires 4 for the point. But that way we're going to do one in case you mess up. You actually only need to do one of these for the point. But we're going to do every single time either A, B, C, or D. So one of those we are going to do. And then we're going to do E and F. So we're going to do one of A, B, C, or D every single time. And then additionally, we are going to do E and F. That is better writing. It's better history. Plus, just in general, what my experience has showed me is it's better to over-deliver on these. And then the graders just love it. They'll be reading the essay and a small tear of joy will start falling down their face. And they'll turn to the reader next to them and they'll say, fellow reader, this student is so incredibly lucky to have had such a wonderful teacher to show them the ways. Because we always take credit whenever you do anything good and blame you when it doesn't work. So anyway, so that is the basic scoring of the DBQ. All right, so now that we got the scoring down, we're going to talk about what you actually need to do to complete a DBQ, how you are going to go about this. So the first step is the pre-writing. And you're going to get 15 minutes on the actual DBQ to do that. On a lot of our DBQ quizzes that we take, this is the 15 minutes that you are going to get. Okay, so we want to use this 15 minutes. So the first thing you need to do is read the question carefully. Ask yourself, what are they asking me to accomplish? And make sure to know whether the question has several parts. Look at what the parameters of the question are, what the time periods, social classes, political and economic, but not social. Just make sure you know what it's asking. Look at the historical thinking skill that they're going to ask you to do. Is it causation? Is it continuity and change over time? Is it comparison? What are they asking you to do? You need to know that task word. The biggest reason students fail on the DBQ is because they didn't answer the question that was asked. They answered the question they felt like answering, or they answered the question they wish they got asked, but they veer away from the question. You need to make sure you answer the question that's being asked. So step 2, after you read the question, is you're going to take 30 seconds and think of potential groups that may answer this question before you even look at the documents. You're going to say, okay, what if this was just an essay question? How would I answer this question? That just primes your brain to get ready for when you're looking at the documents. You have a better idea of what you're looking for. You may or may not get any when you do that, but it helps get you in the right mindset to know what you should be looking for. The next step is a big one, is analyzing the documents. I call this going through and breaking down the documents. You're going to go through and you're going to read each document. Each document, you're going to make notes next to each, including relevant relevant info. Easy for you to say. Like a Sprite, like next to every document, I just write down whether it's artistic, social, political, religious, intellectual, technological, or economic. Just so I know, like, what is this document getting at? How does this document answer the question? Every single document, that's what I'm doing. And I'm flipping back and forth. I flip, I read the question. I flip to the document one. I'm like, okay, how does that answer the question? Read the question again, and read the document. How does that answer the question? And flip back and forth. When you're breaking down the documents, you can also be thinking about your captone, about your content, purpose, audience, bias, point of view, but not for every doc. You're going to look at them, and don't forget, we want 5, but you're going to be like, oh, this is a good one. Okay, well, this is a map. This one doesn't really have a bias. I'm not going to do that one. Then you're going to make a group chart based upon that question. What are your groups? How did your documents answer that question? All right, that's a really big part. That is the bulk of your pre-writing. Then you're going to take a minute and figure out what your contextualization is going to be. All right, how am I going to put this into context? What am I going to say about this before? What is going on? And then also think about your beyond the docs. You're just going to jot these down. Here's what I'm going to write about. Here's what my beyond the docs is going to write about. And then lastly, before writing, you are going to reread the question. Does your outline cover the question completely? Did you use not at least all 7 of the documents, it should say. That's a typo right there. We're going to change that right now in real time. All 7 of the documents. And you're going to do all of this right here in about 15 minutes. 20 tops. Okay? Because then you're going to get into your writing. And you have 45 if you only use 15 minutes to plan. Your introduction paragraph is going to be your contextualization, which is 4 to 5 sentences, and you planned a little bit up here. And then your linking sentence, and then connect with your thesis, which you planned because you have your groups right up here. Okay? So that's your intro. 4 to 5 sentences, you start broad, contextualization, linking sentence, thesis. Your body paragraphs, most of the time you're going to have 3, but it really depends on the essay. Always start your body paragraphs with a topic sentence every single time, and should relate back to the question. What was the primary cause of this? Your thesis is the primary cause of this was X, Y, and Z. Your first sentence in your first body paragraph should be, one primary cause of this was X. Next. Another primary cause of this was Y. Every single time, create a nice, easy path for the reader so they know what they are reading about. Okay? Evidence. Always refer to the documents and depend heavily on them. This is a DBQ, a document-based question. So you must use the documents. Okay? And we're going to use all 7, don't forget. And then, all right, so how do we use the documents? I call this the document package. So every single time you use a doc, this is what you're going to do. You're going to explain how the document supports your argument. That's a couple sentences, okay? Explain how this supports your argument. Then you're going to do analysis, and you're going to explain how the source's captone affects the source's meaning. This is credible. This is not credible. All kinds of different ways to do that with the point of view, purpose, context, audience. You're going to do that in about 2 sentences for 5 of the documents. Okay? So this is what you are doing for every doc. Okay? That's the document package. That's how you're using the document to support your argument. Okay? Make sure that you identify each document by using the author's last name. You're not on a first name basis with any of these people. If you are, let me know. I'd love to meet them. And the document number in a way that the reader cannot help but notice your use of the doc. I call it setting the document off. So for example, you'll be like, Pope Pius, Doc 2, in parentheses, showed disdain for many things, as popes are apt to do. But just make sure, because you don't want the reader to miss that you used that document. Do not quote the documents at length. Paraphrase the documents in your own word using key terms from the doc. The readers don't want to read a quote from the doc. We have these documents memorized by the time you start grading these because we've read these things so many times. Also, just quoting the doc doesn't show that you necessarily know what it means. If you paraphrase the doc, you're showing us you know what it means. Now, if there's a perfectly worded phrase that you just want to use and it's just a few words, fine. Anything bigger than that, honestly, you're wasting your time because the reader's just going to skip it and go to the end of the quotes because we already know what it is. Okay? So that is using the documents. Okay? Included in your body paragraphs, because that's where we are here, is beyond the docs. It's an example or specific piece of evidence beyond those that fits into your paragraph and supports your thesis directly. Complex understanding is the next task in there. You understand historical development prompt using evidence to corroborate, qualify, or modify. Again, this is our BMCT 75. Both multiple, connections, thematic, 7 docs, or captones. Or 5 captones, sorry. BMCT 75. There's 2 ways to do this. Most frequently, it'll be one of your 3 body paragraphs. 2 body paragraphs on political causes that answer your question. Complex understanding paragraph and religious. 2 on differences, 1 on similarities. Or it could be analysis within your paragraph also. But increasingly, we're seeing the College Board setting up for the first way. And then your conclusion, restate your thesis, wrap up your essay. It doesn't need to be much. All right, so some tips from me, first of all, on how to succeed on the DBQ. Frequently refer to the terms of the question. Keep looking back at the question when you're planning your essay. Refer back to those terms, use the words in the question as much as possible. It forces you to think about what you're answering, and it also shows the reader how directly you are answering the question. Grammar and spelling should be adequate. It doesn't have to be great, but don't misspell words in the documents. It just makes it look like you're being careless. Don't ever use the following words in an essay. I, you, we, stuff, things are huge. You just sound like an idiot. Don't. And then note complexity in the documents. Do some documents contradict each other? Do they show change over time? The documents will always be in chronological order. Is something different from the beginning to the end? Are there ambiguities? Are there subtleties? How do documents complement each other? Does one document counter the other one? Is it a direct response to the other one? Notice these things because that helps you build your argument. Now, what does the College Board say? College Board says the primary purpose of DBQ is to evaluate your ability to formulate and support an answer from documentary sources. Okay, good. Documents are chosen on the basis of both the information they convey and the perspective they offer on other documents in the DBQ. The fullest understanding of any particular document emerges only when that document is viewed in relation to others. So don't think of each one as a separate independent contractor. The DBQ, the authors of this, the DBQ takes about 2 to 3 years for the College Board to write because they are trying to make this so perfect. And so these documents have been carefully curated for this question. There's no single correct answer. Instead, various approaches are possible depending on the student's ability to understand the docs and judge their significance. That doesn't mean that there's no wrong answers, because there is, but there's multiple ways to skin this cat. Okay, DBQ is an exercise in both analysis and synthesis. It requires students first read and analyze the documents individually, then plan and construct an appropriate response to the essay questions based on their interpretation of the documentary evidence as a whole. So first you need to look at these individual documents and figure out how they work. Then you're bringing it all together into your essay. There are no irrelevant or deliberately misleading documents. Some documents are more central to an understanding of the topic, but each doc is related to the question and can be used by students in preparation of their essays. They're not trying to fool you. They picked these documents very carefully because they have an answer in mind. They say they have like their answer key that they created ahead of time that says they'll use these docs this way, these docs this way, and these docs this way. Now, again, that's not the only way, but they're not just throwing something in there to mess with you. Essays may contain minor errors that do not detract from the overall quality, as long as the historical content used is accurate. If you're writing about the French Revolution and you're writing everything correct about the French Revolution, but accidentally write 1989 because you're a T Swift fan instead of 1789, the reader isn't going to be like, this kid knows nothing. How are they off by 2 centuries? We understand that, okay? Grammatical errors will not be counted against the student unless they obscure from the argument. So basically, don't write in text speech. Don't write like LOL. Can you use abbreviations? You can use standard abbreviations, Holy Roman Empire, Great Britain, HRE, GB, those type of things. But don't get crazy. You don't want to remind the reader that they're reading a teenager's essay. The crucial skill that readers are looking for in a student's approach to the document is an awareness that the documents are not statements of fact, but descriptions, interpretations, or opinions of events and developments made by particular people at particular places at times for specific reasons. The biggest thing you need to get in your head is these documents are not right. They're not true. They're somebody's interpretation. And if you can get that in your head, it makes so many of the steps easier, okay? It's one person's interpretation or a group or an organization's interpretation. That makes that whole capstone and piecing together your argument so much easier. All right, what are some common mistakes? The first most common mistake we already mentioned. It's not answering the question. Okay, it's veering off. It's like halfway through the essay, you went in a different direction. Not actually using the documents or only summarizing them. This is a DBQ. You must use the documents individually and explicitly. Again, you can't at the beginning of your paragraph say documents 1, 2, and 3 all do this. No, here's how document 1 proves my argument. Here's how document 2 proves my argument. Another common mistake is failing to analyze the documents or determining their significance, treating them all as equal value, as absolute truth, or not noting their bias. It just sounds funny. You would never do that with an individual. If you were talking sports with a fan of one team, talking bad about another team, you would never just take that person's word for it. You'd be like, well, he does hate the Packers, or he is a ridiculous Bears fan. Like, you would take that into consideration. It sounds like you don't know what you're talking about if you don't do it in the essay. Another mistake is failure to use all the docs. Use them all as much as you can. And then this last is from the College Board, and I just think this kind of ties everything together. The most common errors in student response to DBQ include failing to read the instructions, failing to respond to all parts of the question, simply paraphrasing or summarizing the documents, failing to integrate the documents into the essay, failing to answer the question that's being asked, failing to bring in outside content, and failing to analyze the documents to determine their significance and our point of view. So thank you, College Board. You just said the biggest mistakes were people not doing everything they're supposed to do. But okay. And then lastly, I just included a rubric here for you. If that's an easier way for you to look at it, it essentially gives the same information that we did up here on the scoring, just in a kind of graphic point of view. So now you have all the information necessary to dominate the DBQ. Now all we need is lots of practice.